Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you can be alerted when new content is released. Enjoy the video.
The moment you start talking religion or culture or tradition, you're going to divide an audience, because as soon as someone hears a word that intimidates them, they're going to shut off. Science, is just a great way to create community. So we've measured immune responses, and we've seen that people can literally in 4 days begin to strengthen their immune system by 50%. We've measured gene expression. We now know that in 4.5 days that people can signal the gene that reduces cancer and tumors in people's bodies, the gene for neurogenesis, to grow new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning, not just making new connections, but growing new neurons. The gene for stem cells to become activated to go to damaged tissues and repair them.
Really is amazing.
All kinds of significant changes. And we've measured telomere lengths, and we've seen that people who do meditation for just 60 days, 74% of those people lengthen their telomeres. And
74%?
And telomeres are the little shoestrings on the end of their DNA that tells you your true biological age. So imagine somebody's telomeres lengthened by 10%. They get 10% of their life back. We're beginning to realize that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk, that you don't have to be an academic or a scholar, you don't have to be a minister or a rabbi. The common people around the world are doing the uncommon. And I now know that if you give people sound scientific information and they begin to learn it, every time you learn something new, you make new connections in your brain. That's what learning is.
Absolutely.
And the latest research shows that just 1 hour of concentration on one topic doubles the number of connections in certain areas of your brain. But if you don't review that information, you don't repeat it, you don't think about it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So learning
they fade away.
Right. So if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining them. So what's the relevance? Well, if you get a community of people together in a room and you deliver the proper information, and then you tell them to turn to the person next to them and explain what they're learning, once they start engaging the other person and they start thinking about it and talking about it, they're causing their brain to fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind, because mind is the brain in action. So if you keep reminding them of what they're learning, in time they begin to install the neurological hardware in their brain.
I love it.
In preparation for the experience. Now, if you set up the conditions in the environment and you give them the proper instruction, they have to get their behaviors to match their intentions, just like any skill. Get their actions equal to their thoughts. Get their mind and body working together. When they do, they are going to have a new experience, and it's going to change them. And experience enriches the circuits in their brain philosophically, and then all of a sudden, the end product of an experience is an emotion. And the moment you feel more whole, the moment you feel more unlimited, the moment you feel more worthy, the moment you feel that emotion, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. So we say knowledge is for the mind, but experience is for the body. And in that
they
moment,
work together.
They're embodying the truth. Mind and body are now working together. And the end product of that is we begin to change our genetic expression. So here's the point. If you've done it once, you should be able to do it again, right?
You would think.
So as you begin to repeat the experience over and over again, you're going to neurochemically condition your mind and body to begin to work as one. When you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it as well as your mind, now it's innate in you. It's second nature. It's who you are. It's automatic. It's effortless. Now you're beginning to master that philosophy, and it's who you are. You're being it. Our job then is to go from philosopher to initiate to master, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, from mind to body to soul, from thinking to doing to being, to learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, and knowing it by heart. So let's say a person has a betrayal or a trauma or a shock. Do you know, the stronger the emotion that you feel from some situation in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you.
Of course.
The more altered you feel inside of you, the more you pay attention to the cause, and the brain freezes the image and takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. So the stronger the emotion you feel, the more long-term memories you create. So now, that's branded neurologically in the brain, and it's emotionally conditioned in the body. So people tend to think neurologically within the circuits of those past experiences, and then they tend to feel emotionally within the boundaries of those chemical events. And how we think and how we feel, George, is our state of being. So most people are defined as an identity by their past memories. So then the question is, how do you change that? Because the strong emotion could actually downregulate a gene that can begin to signal a disease.
Right.
So then, when we begin to induce these states where a person is going to have a transcendental moment, there's this very significant change that takes place in the brain. And all of a sudden now, 95% of who we are as a personality by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious attitudes and beliefs and perceptions that function like a computer program. So most of the mind is stored in the body. So 5% of our conscious mind is working against 95% of what we've memorized subconsciously. So what's an example of that? Well, an example is you may not remember a phone number. Remember, we're old enough to know this. You pick up the phone, you look at the receiver, and you dial the number.
Right.
You couldn't remember it consciously, but your body did it so many times that it knew how to do it as well as your mind, right? So that's who we are subconsciously. So the trauma is stored in the body as well as in the brain. So then when a person begins to activate these latent systems, energy begins to travel right up the spine, and we can actually predict the moment's going to happen. We actually say, when scientists come and study us, we'll say, she's going to pop. And all of a sudden, that energy that's stored in the body begins to move right up the spine, and it goes to a little gate at the brainstem called the thalamic gate. And that gate opens up, and the sympathetic nervous system switches on, and now the body is driving energy up into the brain. It hits the certain areas of the brain, and the brain goes into what's called gamma brainwave patterns. That is a superconscious state. You can't find this in textbooks. This is supernatural, right? So once that energy goes into the brain, I'll give you an example. The brain switches on to such a degree that those measurements you can't find in any neuroscience research. These people are going into such coherence in their brain. Now, coherence is order. But like most normal coherence in the brain, picture a room of 1,000 people and everybody clapping at the same time. They're applauding at a show. That's incoherence, right? Now, normal coherence, picture the room and every fifth person in that room claps at the same time. That's kind of a brain that has a normal amount of coherence. But when we were measuring this super coherence, picture the entire 1,000 people clapping at the same time to the same rhythm very quickly. That orderliness creates a lot of energy too in the room. So the brain goes into these ecstatic states. That person is having a full-on sensory experience without their senses. Now imagine if your senses were heightened by 25% right now. Everything you're seeing, everything you're hearing, everything you're smelling.
It's heightened by 25%.
Everything you're tasting, everything you're feeling. If your senses are heightened by 25%, so is your awareness of everything around you.
And that's huge.
And you can't have awareness without consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So all of a sudden the brain switches on. They go into these high states of gamma. And the amount of energy in the brain, I'll give you an example. Most people, if we're measuring their vision, if we're measuring their liver enzymes, if we're measuring their height, if we took 1,000 people and we measured them, you would see this curve called a Z-curve or a bell curve. You draw a line right down the middle and you divide it equally in threes. That's 3 standard deviations above normal, 3 standard deviations below normal. That makes up 99.7% of the population. Doesn't matter what we measure.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's just there.
Okay, so our measurements in energy in the brain is 200 standard deviations outside of normal, 300 standard deviations outside of normal, 400 standard deviations outside normal. That means you have to draw another 197 blocks, and that line just keeps getting smaller and smaller. That amount of energy, that person, that inward event is going to reorganize the circuitry in their brain, because that's what experience does, and it's going to produce a profound feeling. Now, that feeling is not fear, it's not anger, it's not hostility, it's not pain, it's not sadness. It is bliss. So now, the moment the person feels this elevated emotion, their heart goes into super coherence, they're feeling tremendous love, and the strong emotion is causing them to pay attention to the pictures in their mind. And in an instant, it's like their past is washed away. So all of a sudden, we're seeing instantaneous changes with health. A person's psoriasis goes away in an instant. A person's working with a spinal cord injury is now walking without crutches. People with Parkinson's disease, their conditions are returning back to normal because the level of energy that's running through their nervous system is giving them a biological upgrade. And now we're seeing the same patterns. We're seeing the same brain scans. We're seeing the same changes in health. And the side effect of it is the person is completely changed as an individual. They're saying, I feel so whole, I feel so happy, I feel so free.